system. He's still a guy who needs to continue to take his game to another level. You saw him targeting wide receivers last night and just really drawing defenders into his primary throwing lanes because he looked like a guy who hadn't seen this kind of speed in a while. So until you are able to adjust your expectations, you're going to be disappointed, especially for the first 4 weeks of the season.
Here's my fear. Are the Chicago Bears going to waste a really, really good defense? Everything's going to be overshadowed in the fact that they lost that football game. The Bears were without a doubt the best defense on that football field, regardless of what the scoreboard said. Khalil Mack, young and good, Leonard Floyd, Roquan Smith. They have all the pieces, and watch how he came downhill right there. That was one of my favorite plays on the second play of the game. The Bears defense, phenomenal. Kyle Fuller, the way he can break on the ball. I just hope that the Bears don't waste one of these generational type of defenses because it's hard to acquire talent like that.
The Packers invested in their defense this offseason, $48 million in free agency. The last 3 years, their first 2 picks in the draft, defensive players, 5 of them defensive backs. That all paid off last night. They ran a ton of dime defense, 6 DBs on the field. That's when Mitch Trubisky struggled the most. And so when you make investments, whether it's free agency or the draft, you like to see those begin to pay dividends. And you heard Aaron Rodgers talk about it. How great was that defense? As a quarterback, he's a Hall of Fame guy that makes him feel completely comfortable when they can hand the ball off on a 3rd and 5 at the end of the game and let your defense take it from there.
Here, Vilma, let me ask you this, because obviously Green Bay's defense was good. Yeah. But how about on the other side? What did you see from Mitch Trubisky?
From Mitch Trubisky, I see an antsy quarterback. I see someone that hasn't developed in his second year. And I was really concerned because they didn't have any go-to plays. This is the second year in the offense. Mitch Trubisky and Nagy should know, all right, I call X play. I know whatever defense they show up with, I can get the ball out to somebody and get comfortable. And he never looked comfortable. Every time we watch him trying to get into the pocket, look at him just start to bounce, move around. And yes, I give credit to the Packers defense, but Trubisky should be much farther along in his progression right now.
But it's to Lewis's point, when you don't play in the preseason, and Greeny, we've talked about this several times, just knocking the preseason. When you don't play those preseason games, you're going to be sloppy, specifically on offense. Offense has to dictate things.
No, this is where I disagree. Drew Brees, granted, we're talking a much different quarterback. He doesn't play a lot in the preseason, but he knows where to go with the football. That's my issue right now. But Trubisky had no idea where to go with the football.
You're talking about a Hall of Famer.
I'm talking about understanding the offense, and I'm talking about there should be 2 or 3 plays that you know where to go with the football.
And there's a lot of blame to go around here. Look, Matt didn't necessarily call his best game last night either, because a lot of the things that you can't see on TV is obviously Mitch sitting there bouncing and holding the football. Well, guys aren't open. And so he's sitting there going, well, where should I throw it?
Well, it should be an outlet.
Exactly. So there's a lot of things that really need to be worked on here, and they have a lot of work to do.
And it wasn't just the quarterbacks. If you saw the delay of games, the substitutions in and out, I mean, preseason, it's like homework. Nobody likes to do it, but you need it.
They had a 1st and 2nd and 40 at one point.
All of these things can be true at the same time. But the one thing that is for certain is that even if neither team really looked ready to play, the game counts.
Yes,
and the Bears just lost a home game in the division in what figures to be a very tight division. Now let's take a look at this here, because Aaron Rodgers, we mentioned it, did not play a single snap in the preseason, and it looked like he needed about a quarter to get going. In that first quarter, he was 2 of 5 for 5 yards. In the rest of the game, he was able to get it going, at least somewhat, completing over 60% of his passes for nearly 200 yards and a touchdown. So let me bring our quarterback into the conversation here. Mark Sanchez, what was your primary takeaway watching Aaron Rodgers, his first game in this new offense last night?
Most importantly, he's waking up this morning. He's a little sore. They got to find a way to keep him upright, bottom line. They're playing against one of the best defenses in football, and I think Chicago will prove that as the year goes on. But he did what he needed to do to win. 1-0 feels a lot better than 0-1 against a divisional opponent with huge implications on the road. They'll figure it out for the next matchup in Green Bay. I'm happy for Aaron Rodgers. This ball looks like he's throwing the ball away. When I was watching the game on TV, I thought he was throwing this ball away, and it became a touchdown. Whatever it takes to win, sometimes you got to win ugly.
Whatever this new offense actually is going to look like on that touchdown play, it looks like he's just kind of moving guys, right? So he is still kind of making it up as he goes along.
In some ways, sure, but I don't think this is a fair assessment. It's just one game, and like we said, like all the guys mentioned, there was no preseason. This was their preseason.
And so Vilma's saying, Breeze would know what to do, but Breeze has been in the same offense forever. Rodgers in a new offense. You think the lack of preseason did affect him?
Each new offense, you're speaking a little bit of a different language. You might say plays that there's certain words that mean certain things.
Right.
And now he's saying those words that mean a different thing. And so he's got to get used to that. It takes time. This whole thing takes time.
Figure it's going to get better one way or another, as I said a moment ago. That is a big win for the Packers, regardless of whether the teams were rusty or not. We'll have much more on this game as we go, but now we get to the next chapter in the soap opera that is Antonio Brown's tenure in Oakland. The team is now reportedly planning to suspend AB after he got into a heated exchange with general manager Mike Mayock on Wednesday. Here was John Gruden on the latest yesterday.
I think for the last 4 weeks we have been practicing without him and preparing to play. No matter who's injured, you have to adapt. And unfortunately, we had to adapt again today, but we're really excited about our receiving corps. I'm emotional about it. I hope you understand why. I think a lot of this guy. I think Antonio is a great receiver. And I think deep down, I think he's a really good guy. So I'm frustrated. I'm not going to say any more about it. Hope it all works out. But I don't have anything official to say about anything else until I get all the facts. And that's what I'm going to do.
That's a man who's tired of talking about all of this, and here's why. This started in July when Antonio Brown reported to camp and immediately went on the non-football injury list because of frostbite from a cryotherapy session that had gone wrong. The month of August then was basically consumed with Brown's grievances with the NFL over his outdated and now outlawed helmet. There were even reports that Brown was considering retiring over the helmet issue. He didn't do that. Things then come to a boil earlier this week. Brown went on Instagram to publicly complain about the $54,000 in fines that he had received from the Raiders in that letter from Mike Mayock, which led to Wednesday's confrontation with Mayock. Now, the $54,000 fine might be the least of Brown's concerns at the moment. If the Raiders suspend him for week one, his $29 million in guarantees will be void, which could pave the way for the Raiders to release him without paying him a cent. If he is active for week one, then the $14.5 million for this year becomes fully guaranteed. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, was in Chicago for the game last night and sat down with our Rob Domofsky.
If it's up to us, he would like to play, but ultimately that's going to be their decision. He would like to honor his contract and fulfill his commitment to the Raiders. I think he can be repaired, and that's something that I'm working on, that Antonio's working on. So hopefully we're successful with that moving forward.
We'll have Rosenhaus live here in about a half hour. Meanwhile, I've got Adam Schefter with the very latest on the phone right now. Schefter, we just heard from Drew that they're hoping to repair all of this. What is the latest as of this moment on AB in Oakland?
Greeny, you heard that Drew recognizes that it's up to the Raiders to make the final decision right now. And very rarely do you get a situation where you have a future Hall of Fame wide receiver being separated from the new general manager in the week of the regular season opener. I don't know that we could ever recall an incident like that happening, certainly not in front of a team the way that this incident unfolded Wednesday. And I think the reason that the Raiders yesterday took a step back is because they are going through their options legally right now to figure out what they can and can't do, what is and isn't permissible, what would happen if they did wind up releasing him, what would happen if they winded up suspending him for 4 weeks. But make no mistake about it, we're not going to see Antonio Brown this week. That was clear from the moment that he and Mike Mayock got into it and had to be separated. And now we wait to see what the Raiders decide. And Drew Rosenhaus recognizes that he's at the mercy of the Oakland Raiders here, because when Mike Mayock sent that letter that Antonio Brown documented, the key phrase at the end of that was any acts of conduct detrimental to the team would be a situation where further action could be warranted. And what you're talking about in this particular case is something that people around the league sometimes call progressive discipline. And that's what we would be referring to here. Progressive discipline is the key phrase to watch. It could wind up costing Antonio Brown his career in Oakland. We'll see what the Oakland Raiders decide to do.
All right, Shefty, we will be with you all morning long as this thing continues to develop. I brought up the question yesterday as we take it out here to the table. Will Antonio Brown make it through the season in Oakland? It didn't occur to me to ask, will he make it to the season in Oakland? But that now appears to be the relevant question. Acho, what do you think?
Looking at it from a big picture, if Antonio Brown never plays for the Raiders this season, I don't think he plays football again. And I don't think that's a hot take. I don't believe that's drastic. He has now burned bridges in two organizations in a very large scale to where the whole nation has seen it. In Pittsburgh, a lot of people heard about it. But now in Oakland, plus with Hard Knocks, you can't really take a chance on him again if he burns this bridge. Phenomenal talent. John Gruden said in his interview, we have other receivers I'm excited about. I just looked it up, Greeny. Antonio Brown last year had more catches and touchdowns than the rest of the receiving corps combined.
Yeah.
So they need him there. He needs to be on the football.
Mark, what do you make of all this?
Listen, Rex Ryan had to deal with a lot of personalities in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, I recall him saying, hey, the bus leaves at 2:30 unless you're Darrelle Revis. But at a certain point, guys bought in. This has reached a threshold now. You cut ties and move on. It's over there. It's done.
Lewis, let me come to you here. You're doing their game on Monday night, so you've obviously been studying them very closely. Again, their game Monday night against Denver, whether AB plays or not, and Shefty just said he won't, is on ESPN, and you're going to be in the booth for the game. How do you handle this situation right now if you're the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, they're up against it, aren't they? I mean, he's basically backed them into a corner. And see, this thing I will say about this, though, from a suspension standpoint is, me personally, looking at it and listening to John and the words that he's using, when he starts referencing that he's emotional, that he really likes the young man, that he's letting you know that he's very much so invested in this young man's, career and what he can really contribute to this football team, because John brought him there for a reason. And make no mistake, John brought him there.
Right.
John brought him there.
Mm-hmm.
So do not forget. So
point.
when you're talking about the suspension and could he possibly not play football ever again, I would slow down on that, because I believe he will play again. I personally believe John has too much invested in him, both in terms of what he can bring to his offense and how he feels about him personally, to just cut ties with him. Because, look, that's just the way it works in the NFL. It becomes personal sometimes. Yep. And sometimes, guys, when we sit here on the outside, we sit there and go, hey, look, it's easy. Just cut him. Rid yourself of him and move on. But you're not there, so you don't really know.
Lewis, I wish you could elaborate more on that point. People do not know enough of the dissension that can occur between head coach and general manager. If a head coach brings someone there, but the GM calls the shots, remember what happened with Albert Haynesworth with the Washington Redskins. $100 million guy, never really played because there was beef between the head man and the GM.
And that's not to say that I'm not trying to, suggest that there is dissension. I'm just saying this, though. We know who's driving the bus in Oakland.
Yes.
And we know that John specifically wanted AB because he loves the way he plays. And the fact of the matter is, you can't cover this guy. And he makes their offense one that goes from here to here. All of a sudden now they go from being an also-ran where you're constantly just beating on the Raiders to maybe being a wild card team. Yes. And he knows that too.
You must account for him. So I understand Gruden's frustration. He just wants the guy on the field.
Exactly.
Give me the toy to play
so
with.
I think they're going to work very hard, I would bet, to put this in Antonio's court and say, look, will you kind of abide by some of the things we need you to do?
You got to buy in.
And exactly.
If you're Antonio Brown, I'm not sure what more you could ask than they've given you. They gave him the money that he wanted. They said he's going to be the focal point of the entire offense. These are not the actions of a person who wants to be a football player right now. Again, we will have much more on this as we continue, including Drew Rosenhaus live. He will be live with us here in a half hour, answer all the questions on what Antonio Brown wants, where he's going, and will he ever play for the Oakland Raiders. That's Rosenhaus live with us a half hour from now on Get Up. Meanwhile, let me get up and go. Odell